Truck drivers. What's a creepy story you've got from the middle of nowhere? Trucker here. I think the best creepy thing that ever happened to me was I was heading from Tucson as up into Salt Lake City. Well, this was a few years ago, and the main highway had been taken out in a flash flood, was under construction, so I had to take a weird detour through the mountains in lower Utah. Well, it was getting late, and I was getting tired, so I pulled off onto the shoulder and went to sleep in my bunk. Now this was in the middle of nowhere. Closest town was like 40 miles away, so it is completely pitch black outside once I turn the lights off. Anyway, around 4 AM I wake up because I'm hearing something messing with my truck, like playing with the air and power cables between my cab and the trailer, which is literally 6 inches from where my head is at but on the outside of the cab. Then I feel something climb onto the landing that's on the back of my truck, and it shakes my whole truck. So I'm guessing something around 200 to 300 pounds was climbing around back there. I'm thinking like a mountain lion or a bear. At this point I'm wide the F awake, and I want to get this thing away from me. So I slam my hand into my cab wall trying to scare whatever is out there. Slam hard enough to really make it loud. I then hear someone, a male, scream bloody murder, and I hear them fall off the back of my truck. I then hear about 15 other people all around my truck yelling. I climb up front, turn on my lights, and illuminate a squad of Army reserves doing their midnight truck march and capture drills. Turns out these guys were supposed to go find an abandoned truck and secure it for their midnight drills. That truck was 3 miles back down the road. They were not expecting me to be sleeping there and thought I was part of the drill. I'm ex-military, so after explaining I was not part of their test and legit was just there out of coincidence, we laughed it off. They had to radio to their CO and tell him I was there and not have the other squads bother me. Mayo, imagine the look of horror on their faces when the abandoned truck has something inside it. Always expect the unexpected, right? I used to deliver hotshot freight across the Great Plains/Minnesota area. One night around 2 AM I was hauling across North Dakota trying to reach Montana by morning. I was delivering a particularly valuable tractor part that a farm desperately needed for the following day. I began to notice some highway hypnosis sneaking up on me, but it didn't really bother me because I'd been through it hundreds of times before. Anyone who has driven across North Dakota knows that it is incredibly flat, like really flat. There also tends to be very straight and long roads. It's somewhat easy to see things on the road that are far away, even at night. I noticed something long on the road, spanning my entire lane, approximately half a mile in front of me. I slowed down a little and prepared to move into the opposite lane, thinking it was some retread off a blown tire. As I got closer I noticed it was 2 people, laying head to toe across the entire lane. I swerved into the other lane, successfully avoiding them, and came to an almost complete stop. But they didn't move, not an inch. I was just about to back up and check on them when I remembered a story that an old graybeard colleague of mine told me. He told me that in certain remote areas, people will lie down in the middle of the road and wait for a car or truck to stop and see what's going on. At that point, the road layers along with whoever else is hiding in the nearby bushes will beat the s out of the driver and steal his vehicle, leaving him in the middle of nowhere. I decided not to back up, and when the 2 people in the road saw me put my truck back in gear and drive away, they both got up and walked toward the shoulder. I called the police and explained what happened, but we were so far away from civilization that I doubt anything came of it. Thanks to that old graybeard, I got to keep my truck, my job, and my teeth. Definitely the right move. Another response on this thread spoke of the same thing happening. Only difference I think was that you didn't run them over, lol. I didn't see them in the road, your honor. Not sure if this story is creepy, but it's definitely scary. My father was a truck driver in East Africa in the 80s and early 90s. During the years leading up to the Rwandan genocide, my father was passing through Rwanda. He reached a checkpoint and was forcibly removed from his truck at gunpoint. Apparently he looked like he belonged to the Tutsi tribe, and they put him in a cage with other Tutsi prisoners. He tried communicating that he isn't Rwandan, but no one spoke the same language as him. Every night they would take about 5 people from the cage and slaughter them in front of him. After the 3rd night, he saw a man that spoke a little bit of Swahili, which my dad spoke, and told him that he's not Rwandan and showed him his ID. Somehow that guy got him out, and he was handed the keys to his truck and was on his way. Jesus, I'm so glad your dad survived, but my heart breaks for the others. I bet he had some major trauma from seeing people killed in front of him. Not op, but trauma from seeing people die does affect people differently. Big sad here. Skip for no sad faces while reading. I witnessed 2 kids murdered in the car in front of me when my mom dropped my brother off at the school. Doors were locked. Back in the day it was okay to leave a kid in a car with AK. But a man who lost his daughters in a custody battle walked up to the car in front of me and shot both of them through the head. 5 shots. I saw it all. I saw him run across the street to the parking lot and blow his brains out. It's a major memory that I can't get out of my head. I hear the gunshots, the one scream before it ended, the glass breaking. I even fucking remember him closing the car door before running 20 feet and then watching him twitch before my mom and my brother's teacher bolted through the front door to get me and everyone else inside. No more big sad here. It's a memory that'll never escape me. The best thing I can do is focus on other things like friends and what's happening around me. It's such a repressed memory that I only ever think of it if someone directly asks me if I've seen someone died before. My heart sinks, and I'm flushed with a cold chill and nauseated every single time. It's okay though. Great friends, and lots to keep me busy, so I don't ever think about it anymore. Well, this thread is the first time in about 2 years I thought about it, so if you'll excuse me, I'll exit this thread now. But if you have something troubling you, talk to people about it, or other things, if you need to not think about it. I had to go to counseling for several months afterwards. I managed to pull through decently though. Don't be afraid to ask anyone for help if you need to. There is no shame. And if you have things that trouble you and you need to speak to someone, feel free to load up my inbox. I'll talk to anyone who needs it. Driving through rural NM. Bisty area with the crazy melted rock look. No plants or anything. Just rock and sand. Monsoon time. Raining cats and dogs, just pouring so hard you could barely see, going 20 miles per hour. Thunder and lightning just rocking the car. Sometimes turning into hail and pounding you. Just a nasty storm. Came around the corner. And the whole countryside legit on fire. Like 20 feet tall flames. Hundreds of yards in all directions while pouring rain at dusk. Just rocks and dirt wildly on fire in the pouring rain. Just slowly drove on. Was totally freaky and surreal. Honestly thought I may have hallucinated it. Checked the news. A propane truck slid off the road going way too fast and apparently busted open pretty violently and lit on fire. Never saw the truck. Must have been behind something. Felt a bit bad after about not stopping. Don't feel bad. I would not stop for flames in a rainstorm, especially in Skinwalker country. Besides, there really isn't much you could have done, I bet. My dad drove a truck between Edinburgh and London and tells this story often. He was driving down the motorway and looked to his right. Saw a woman with a "mistrunchable bun," as he describes it, staring at him with a terrified expression from a car next to him. Before he really knows how to react, the car pulls off at the next exit and my dad, although shaken, carries on. About half an hour later, a different car with a different driver pulls alongside my dad, with the same woman in the passenger seat, with the same expression on her face. My dad thinks back, "fuck this," and plans to pull into the next services to report, as even if it's nothing/misunderstanding. Better to be safe than sorry, right? Anyway, the car disappears before he can get any details. Plate CTC, and he thinks there is no point calling the police with no details, so he carries on driving. Literally about 4 hours later, almost in London, yet another car pulls alongside him with the same woman. Same mistrunchable hair. Same terrified expression. Except this time she appears to be screaming at my dad through the window. So my dad pulls over into a lobby and calls the police. Apparently they have received 3 other calls about the same woman/car in the same area in the last few minutes. It is unfortunately anticlimactic as he never heard anything more about it, but he didn't see her again, and although he kept an eye on the news, didn't see anything about it. Hopefully it's just a giant coincidence. Who knows? The repeating nature of this one reminds me of one weird story back when I was in high school. It was summer and my dad's birthday, so we drove to a casino 2 hours away to watch a boxing match with my uncle. It finishes and we drive back the same night. We are nearing a canyon with no phone reception, so we call my mom and tell her we'll be home soon. Canyon usually takes about 30 minutes with no traffic. It's around midnight, so we enter the canyon and we are all pretty tired. To keep us talking we start telling stories, most of them creepy stories. This goes on for a while, and it feels like time is passing in a haze. We pass this but in the canyon and suddenly I get deja vu. I'm convinced we already passed that before. All of us have driven this canyon 100 times and know the layout. We keep talking, and then we pass the same but again. This time I point it out, and my dad and uncle notice the time. It's 1 AM, and we are still not home. So we all start to get a bit freaked out. We stop talking and just watch the road slowly pass by. Now that we are paying attention though, time seems to catch up. We exit the canyon around 1:15 AM and call my mom, who is freaked out she hadn't heard from us. We still to this day have no idea where that extra 45 minutes or so went. Around 2006 I was driving flatbed. Picked up a load of construction material, drywall, roofing. Don't remember, but it was pre-packaged in boxes and I remember having to use strap protectors on the load in rural Tennessee. Memory is foggy now, but I want to say it was between Memphis and Nashville, but closer to the intersection of the manuscript, AL-TN state lines. Tarp required, so I strapped everything down, tarped the load, and left the shipper. About 5 miles down the road, in the middle of nowhere woods on a 2-lane road, I noticed my tarp flapping in the wind. Found a wide shoulder and pulled over to fix it. I realized that I just flat did a shitty job tarping this load and decide to redo it on the side of the road. Undo all the bungee straps, drag the tarps off, roll them back up, climb up on the load, and start unrolling the tarps again. And I see a guy walking down the same side of the road I'm on, coming towards my truck. I don't think anything about it other than to keep an eye on him cause I'm in the middle of nowhere, and continue what I'm doing. About the time I have tarps set in place and I'm climbing down to start hooking the bungee straps back on, this dude is getting close enough that I'm now paying more attention to him than I'm to tarping my load. I grab my winch bar and set it on the trailer where I'm working just in case. 8-pound solid metal bar about 4 feet long, tapered to a blunt point on one end and hollow on the other. Used for tightening straps and chains, etc. The guy gets to me and the first thing I notice is his hair. It's like a mullet, but it's patchy as F. Like he tried to cut his own hair and had a seizure in the process and said F it good enough to party. The next thing I notice were his eyes, which I can only describe as off. Like they were clear. I didn't think he was drunk or high or anything, but it also gave me the distinct impression that the elevator didn't go all the way up. Clothes were dirty and not well maintained, with dirty white tennis shoes. Cause I remember he didn't have laces on one shoe and the tongue was noticeably out of place. He stops by me, waits until I acknowledge him, and just says I've got a long walk. I'm like, yeah man, you do. We're in the middle of nowhere, making it clear there's no ride to be had here. He nods, starts walking by me, continuing on his way, stops at about the driver door on my truck and turns around, comes back to me and repeats himself. I've got a long walk. At this point I explain that I can't give him a ride, insurance and all that. Apologize for not being able to help him out, and he seems to accept this. Turns around and leaves. I wait for him to get a little ways away from my truck and start working on finishing the tarp job. I still keep an eye on him, and he's moving away from me. As I'm putting on the last of the bungee straps I look over to check where he's at, and he's turned around heading back towards me. Now about 100 yards in front of my truck, and coming back my way. It looks like he's talking on a cell phone. Has his hand up to his face and I can barely make out his mouth moving. His other hand waving, like he's having a conversation with someone. I finish with the straps, Grab my winch bar, and I'm climbing into my truck as he's about 10 yards away now. Soon as I'm in the cab I lock the doors and set the winch bar on the passenger seat just in case. I look at the guy and realize he's not talking on a phone. He's talking to his effing hand, and now I'm nervous. Cause he doesn't look like he's having a nice pleasant chat. It looks more like an angry conversation. Crank the truck up, put it in gear and just pull out. Didn't look for traffic or anything. As I pass him, he's just looking at me, still holding his hand to his face with this dead look on his face, just staring at me. Gave me the creeps. About the time I hit 5th or 6th gear I look in the mirror and there's no one there. Sounds like you ran into Trevor Phillips. Not a truck driver, but I have one weird story from when I was a kid. My parents always took us on long road trips every summer, and my dad liked to take meandering routes through rural towns to see all the tourist traps. One trip, we passed through a little town in Illinois, the kind you miss if you sneeze. This one had mannequins. Every house and business was only populated by mannequins. I don't remember seeing any people. Everything looked maintained and clean, so someone was at least caring for the place. There weren't any signs or anything indicating it was for tourists. Just a convenience store / bait shop with a sign reading "Eat here, get worms." Driving through a national park in the middle of the night, going through a slow stretch at about 30 km/h. Every so often I think I see something out the window and beside me. Just a glimpse of movement. When I look though I don't catch it. Finally, on about the 3rd time I whip my head around, and this time I recognize it's a huge black wolf following alongside my truck just off the highway. I only saw it for a few seconds before I had to focus back on the road, but it was absolutely lovely yet unsettling. Not long ago I got lost in a national park that I was visiting for the first time. I was hiking and went too far in. Around 9 PM it was an abyss. Thankfully it was clear sky and bright full moon, which helped me figure out the landscape. I was using phone's flashlight and was carrying a DSLR camera with external flash. The phone died, so I had to use the camera's focus Iris beam to light my path and strobe test the flash, hoping a ranger would see it and come pick me up. Anyways, as I was pointing the camera left and right, lighting my path to make sure I don't step on a snake, all of a sudden 2 glowy eyes. I had never seen a wolf's eyes glowing on the dark before, and seeing this for the first time was just a whole new shit my pants category for me. I froze solid, thinking that this was it for me. Now, someone somewhere told me that dogs can smell fear, so if you think and act like an alpha, they won't F with you. So I thought maybe I should do the same and kept walking. For some reason the wolf ignored Maya, and I was like, I'm definitely gonna run into the pack, but thankfully didn't. Wolves are really cool, and it's fascinating how they just appear and disappear out of nothing. Rarely bother with humans though. Mountain lions are the true nightmare.